Hi, everybody. What we're going to do now is have a bit of a chat about some of the dangers online for children, and in particular, the danger of online pornography. And we're very lucky today to have a young man willing to have a chat to us. His name's Jordan Hodge. He's a young married man. He currently works in events, but he did spend a couple of years working in youth ministry in our archdiocese, and he's a very, very generous in wanting to talk to parents and to young people about the issue of pornography and how it impacts young people. So, welcome, Jordan.
Hey, everyone.
Jordan, we're really grateful that you're here with us, and I'd just really love you to be able to tell the parents your story of how you first came across pornography. You've already told me that you developed quite an addiction over several years. So if you're just happy to tell us about how that happened, what the trajectory was, that would be just a good thing for us to hear.
Yeah, totally, definitely. So I guess a little bit of background about me. I was brought up mainly in Canberra. I'm not born in Canberra, mainly Canberra. I went to St. Eddie's and started there in year 4 and went all the way through to year 12. And that's actually where I was kind of introduced to pornography, which is a very common thing for a lot of young men. It was probably about year 6, year 7, something like that, late primary school from memory, that I first came across pornography. And that was actually on the Oval. There was like a group of kids on the Oval who were kind of crowding around a phone. And at that point, I didn't know what was going on, but I was curious and walked over to the group and realized that they were watching pornography on their phone. And that was that was the first time that I ever saw anything. Before that, I kind of knew it existed. I knew what it was, but had never encountered it. And that kind of set off a little spark. I guess from there it grew into, due to a lot of different things, accessibility at home through the internet. And then later on, when I got a smart device that had access to the internet, I kind of grew and grew and grew until, I guess, long story short, until I was probably about 19 years old. I had a very full-fledged addiction whereby I'd be watching pornography for almost 4 hours a day, essentially. 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night was a pretty standard average.
I'll just stop you there for a second. So obviously by the time you're an adult, you've got a lot more control over your time, and you can find the time and the privacy to use pornography. But as a kid, if you kept using it at home on the internet, etc., were your family aware that you were using it?
No, not at all. That's kind of part of the thing, actually. It's kind of, you get a little bit of a kick out of getting away with it and hiding it. It's part of that kind of sinister nature of it. The hiding of it feeds the whole downward spiral, you know what I mean? But yeah.
So you went from being a young boy, like 12 years old, to 19, and by the time you were 19, you said you had a fully fledged addiction that you might spend 4 hours on. I know for a fact that now you would say that's a bad thing. So from your perspective as a young man, what was bad about pornography? How did it impact the way you thought about yourself? How did it impact the way you thought about relationships? What impact did it have on you?
Yeah, totally. So there was a couple of things that I started to realize were really, really bad about pornography. The number one thing for me personally was the amount of time that it stole away from real life. You know what I mean? The amount of time that I would spend in this virtual world that was made up and very, very, very far from reality. That was the big thing for me. But I also started to notice other things that were starting to get a real hold of me, especially the way that I would see women. I didn't see women as you would see your mum or your sister anymore. It was different. I had this objectification that was very concreted in my brain, and I don't know where that really at that point I didn't know where it had come from. But I just saw every single woman as a sexual opportunity and nothing more. And that was something that when I really was self-aware enough to realize that, something that completely shocked me. I didn't think that was something that I would think, an attitude that I would have, but it was an attitude that was built in my brain by pornography. I guess that's what I realized later on. They were kind of two of the major things. The other thing was how it drew me away. Like I kind of said, drew me away from reality before, but drew me away from real relationships was a really bad thing for me. at that point had a girlfriend who is now my wife. And at night, especially, we were doing a long distance relationship at the point where I kind of discovered it was bad. And I would rather watch pornography than call her at night. And I started to realize how pornography had this control over my life. It wasn't me living my life anymore, but pornography kind of dictating what I would do with my hours. And that scared me. That really scared me.
Mm. So when you decided to make a break from it, what precipitated that and how did you manage it?
Well, I guess the first thing, to be honest, the thing that kind of shocked me into it was a Catholic priest. He actually, he pointed out the fact that it was bad. I remember I was on a retreat to do with youth ministry work at the end of the year, and he pointed out it was bad. Up until that moment, I was 19 years old when that happened, and working in youth ministry, working for the church, I had never even thought that pornography was a bad thing. In fact, I was told that it was a good thing. It was a healthy thing for a young man to be doing. So this was a shock to the system, hearing this. I remember I actually confronted the priest and said, like, you know, man, have you ever read a biology textbook? You know, you clearly don't know what you're talking about. And this priest put it straight back on me. And he said, have you ever read any biology textbooks? As in essentially confronting me, saying, you're wrong, you need to do your research. So that kind of spurred me on. I felt, you know, very beat down, and I was like, no, I'm not going to go down without a fight. So I'm going to do my research, and did my research and found out, no, actually, this is a serious issue that has serious kind of detrimental effects, especially for young men later on in their life. And that was the shock that I guess gave me the motivation to do something about it.
So what was some of that stuff you found out, Jordan, when you went researching for yourself?
I guess some of the big things was how it can physically change your brain, and the ways in which it can create neural pathways to thoughts that you would not usually be thinking. Kind of what I was talking about before with objectifying women, and that becoming a natural thing. That's not a natural thing for a male. You know, males are naturally attracted to women, but they don't naturally think of women as a sexual opportunity only. That's not natural. Pornography can create, well, it's not pornography that does it, but it's the chemicals in your brain linked with pornography that can create neural pathways in your brain to think thoughts that are not a standard kind of thing. Found out about that. I guess I found out other things which were pretty shocking. Things like the chemical in your brain that pornography relies on is actually far more addictive than cocaine is. So it kind of put into perspective for me that this wasn't a little thing that wasn't a big deal. It was actually something very, very serious that I needed to start taking seriously and thinking about. It wasn't just a little, you know, habit or fun thing that I did. It was bigger than that, and had much bigger consequences than I'd ever kind of considered.
Yeah. So you decided to stop. So tell us that story. How did you go about that? How did you find it? Was it easy enough to do? Did you tell your girlfriend? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of steps that I took. It's funny. It is an addiction, and pornography can easily lead to an addiction. And it was, I guess the steps that I took were very similar to how you would beat alcohol addiction or gambling or something like that. The first thing that I did, and I was very lucky in this case, was I found what's called an accountability partner. At that time, I was living with a very, very good friend of mine. We were sharing a house, and he was also struggling with the same thing. And so it was very good. We were able to keep each other accountable because we knew each other's struggle. And that's very similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. They do the same thing. You have a partner who walks that journey with you and picks you up when you stumble, when you fall, when you do the wrong thing. They put you back on the straight and narrow. And so that was the first thing I did, and that was a huge, huge, huge help. I did tell my girlfriend. That was a very difficult and scary thing to do. But, you know, I knew there was something that needed to be done. And she was very supportive. She was, you know, incredibly supportive. I think if she wasn't, she wouldn't be married to me now. But she saw that, you know, it wasn't me. It wasn't the real Jordan that was doing these things. It was this new kind of pornography addicted persona that I had, and she just needed to pull me out of that, and whatever she could do to help, she was happy to help. So that was a huge, massive thing for me. The other thing that I did, which seems very little, but I think had a massive effect on me, more so I initially thought, was I started following a lot of pages on Facebook and Instagram that were anti-pornography. A couple of religious pages, but a lot of them were not necessarily religious. They were just science-based pages. The big one for me was a page called Fight the New Drug. It's FTND. They're very big now on Facebook and Instagram. They weren't super huge when I came across them, but they were sharing a lot of really, really good, interesting facts about pornography and the dangers of pornography. The reason I did that was because what I wanted for my future was not someone who had this urge and this addiction for pornography, but had the ability to resist it. What I wanted was for my brain to think of pornography as disgusting and a terrible thing to do to my brain and my body. So what I needed to do was flood my brain with the messages that it is bad, that it's unhealthy, that it has bad effects later on in life.
Now, feel free not to answer this question, but I know you only got married fairly recently. So do you feel, looking back, that your porn use has had an impact on your relationship? And if so, are you happy to share about that? Feel free not to if you don't want to.
No, of course. It definitely has, without a doubt. Any addict to anything will tell you that you carry that addiction with you for a long time. I'm 24 years old now, so it's been about a 5-year journey, and I can be honest and say that it wasn't very clean cut. It wasn't like I'm stopping and then I stopped. That's very difficult, and it was a long journey. It took me a while to get it under control, and even still now, it's something that pops up in my head. The triggers that were always triggers are still triggers. I just have far more control over it now. And I have a far better perspective of the effects it's going to have in my life. But it's definitely something I still struggle with. One of the things that I constantly have to do is just remind myself how much I love my wife, and just how lucky I am to have her. And when one of the things, like I said, the way that you see women, I might be driving the car down the street or something, and I see an attractive woman going for a jog. There's a difference between appreciating that she's attractive and instantly thinking of what it would be like to have sex with her. Porn teaches you the latter. Teaches you to, if you see an attractive woman, the only normal thought to have would be to think about having sex with her. So what I need to do is I can appreciate her being attractive. If she's attractive, there's no point saying she's not. However, I need to remind myself that I love my wife, and that the thoughts that I'm thinking, or the thoughts that I want to think, are not natural, normal things. They're things that have been concreted in my brain by a fake reality, which is pornography. Mm-hmm. So it's a struggle. It's a thing that I have to go through every single day.
Yeah. So look, you keep talking, you have said a few times that it's like a fake reality, because I think some parents could still be listening to you thinking, well, so you need to get over it and be committed to your wife, but isn't it sort of normal and natural for a young man to be curious and to explore his sexuality? You could have been sexually active, you could have got some girl pregnant, you could have got an STI, but you were doing porn. So isn't that less bad? Like I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well,
that's a very normal thing to think, I guess. So it's tricky because discovering sexuality and learning about sexuality as a young man, a young woman is a normal and healthy thing. That is. However, there are good ways to explore that, and there are very, very bad ways to explore that. One of those very, very bad ways is through pornography, because it doesn't actually educate you at all on what sexuality is like. It shows you this fabricated idea of what sex could be. The whole idea about pornography, and the thing you need to understand, is that it's not. A lot of people call it an educational tool. If it was an educational tool, it'd be a lot more boring than it is, because it is overinflated and over everything to get more views. It's a business. It's a product, and pornography producers know it's a product, and they know how to sell more of their product by making it more unrealistic and more incredible and more enticing. And so what they do is they create scenes that are never going to happen in the real world. Not only that, but they disregard the conversational relationship aspect of a relationship. You know, if you want to move your sexual relationship along and do something new, you would talk about that and discuss that with your partner. In pornography, it's different. What the man wants is what the man gets. And this is an attitude that is being embedded into young people's minds who watch pornography. Not only that, but the sheer amount of violence that is found in pornography, that women are attracted to violent partners and they like violence in bed. And this isn't just like a little bit of, you know, extreme stuff here and there. This is very serious, disturbing violence. That's a normal thing that a woman, every woman in fact, is attracted to. So that is not sexual exploration during puberty. That's misinformation, is what it is. It's not a healthy way of figuring out, you know, where you fit sexually in the world. It's just giving you the wrong ideas. That things that are so far from real. There's far better, far healthier ways of exploring sex. One of the big ways, which seems a bit of a cliche and probably also a bit of a scary thing, but one of the easiest ways for a young person to further understand that is to talk to their parents. And I know that for most kids would be like, oh gosh, and for most parents they'd be thinking, oh no, not this again. But it's one of the most surefire ways of a child actually understanding what is real.
Yeah, and look, I can back that up as a parent, but also in terms of the research that the research does show that, awkward as it is talking to your kids about sexuality, all the studies show that kids would much rather, if they have a choice to learn about it from anybody, they would much rather learn about it from their parents. And I think that holds up to about the age of 13 or 14. Yeah. And that doesn't mean it's not awkward. It still is going to be awkward because parents don't like to think about their kids having sex and kids don't like to think about their parents having sex. I think it's just a natural generational kind of barrier there. So it is awkward, but that's okay. It doesn't mean you don't have a go. So Jordan, we need to wrap up now, but so here you are, you're a young man who started using porn at the age of around 12 and you use it till you were 19. Then you have 5 years trying to stop porn use, and now you're in a beautiful relationship with a beautiful woman. So if, just to, I guess, give some parents some confidence, and you don't have children yet, but what can they be saying to their kids about what, if porn isn't going to help them, their children prepare well for a healthy sexual relationship, what is, or what is it about porn that's not going to help, and what will help to prepare well for a healthy sexual relationship?
Yeah, I guess the things that young people should know about pornography, one, that it can be dangerous, that it can be very dangerous. You wouldn't let a let's say, you know, an 18-year-old, your 18-year-old is going to their first party and there's alcohol there. You wouldn't let them go to that party without being prepared for the dangers that alcohol presents. It's the same thing with accessing the internet. There's dangerous things on the internet. There's things that they shouldn't be accessing, and there's things that can harm them later on in life. So they need to know about that. One of those things, one of the major things, is pornography. So they need to understand that it can be very dangerous and it can lead to addiction. It can lead to crumbling, ruined relationships. That's something they need to know. They need to know that it's not an educational tool. They need to know that there are far better ways of educating themselves about sex. And if for whatever reason they go looking on the internet for sexual education, they're not going to find any realistic ideas of what a sexual relationship is through pornography. All they're going to find is mass-produced, overproduced product that is meant to hook them in. That's all they'll find in pornography. So
what would be your advice for preparing well for a healthy relationship later in life?
The big thing is communication, I guess. They need to understand that a relationship is two parties. It's not just one party and what they want. It comes down to communication, and that's not something that's presented in pornography. there's no communication. Like I said, it's what the man wants is what the man gets. And so, yeah, they need to understand that communication's the big key there. And you know, they may have sexual desires that they, you know, would like to do with a partner in the future. But that is something that they can talk about with their partner, you know, in a healthy sexual relationship. That's a normal thing to do, is to talk about that, and to talk about sex with a partner. It's not a thing they need to shy away from. And that communication will lead to a far deeper, far better experience of sex than pornography would ever give them. You can never get, you know, a screen is never going to be able to provide the same level of awesome relationship that a committed partner who knows you deeply and knows your desires. It's never going to be able to match that. You know what I mean? Pornography industry will try its best, but it can't match a deeply loving partner who understands you. And so they just need to switch their gaze. And although pornography can be seen as an easy fix and something that can be easily attainable, when they put in effort to a real sexual relationship, that's always going to be far greater. Always going to be far greater.
Wonderful. Well, look, thank you so much, Jordan. That's really great. Really appreciate your willingness to chat to us and to be so open. And thank you so much.
No problems. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.